Good morning. It's Sunday, June 5th, and today I want to talk about something that has gotten worse and worse over the last couple of years. And the subject is hate crimes. And in New York alone, hate crimes are up almost 200% this year. Now, what exactly is a hate crime? Well, according to the New York Police Department, hate crimes are offenses that are motivated in whole or in a substantial part by a person's group or a place identification with a particular race, religion, ethnicity, gender, age, disability, ancestry, national origin, or sexual orientation. Now that's a very broad, wide spectrum of things that could be considered a hate. And that's why hate crimes, when you look at the statistics, many cases come up before judges and jurors, and the convictions for hate crimes are very, very low. What we find in the statistics, that of the people who are arrested for these so-called hate crimes, 65% of them are convicted of a crime, but a very small percentage of those crimes are designated as a hate crime, because it's extremely difficult to prove that a person had this intention of hurting somebody because they were Asian or black or a Jew or some other group. It's very difficult to pin that on a person. There's no question that if somebody was bludgeoned or attacked by a group of fists or stabbed or something like that, there's no question that the crime was committed. But if the reason the crime was committed was hate, that is extremely difficult to prove. So in many cases, these crimes are convicted, but not as hate. And you know where the worst place in the city that is happening? It's in the Bronx, my old stomping ground. Only 1% of those people suspected of a hate are ever charged with a hate. Now that can be because the district attorneys of each of these districts has a different criteria for processing these crimes. So if the district attorney is lenient, or perhaps is too lazy to go through the whole exercise of really proving that this was a hate crime, these hate crimes just go on the books as a crime, a plain old crime. And that's bad. I think that's really bad, because you arrest somebody, you believe it could be a hate crime, but you're not willing to put the work in to prove it. And that's very difficult to prove, because the perpetrator is probably not going to admit that he attacked a person who he did not even know because of their color. I mean, look at what happened with the pandemic. All of a sudden, there was a rise in crimes committed against the Asian communities. And that was directly related to the pandemic and the reports that China had created this disease. And so most of the people who were angry about it took it out on Asians. But I will bet you that many of those crimes were not put on the books as a hate crime. And if the alleged perpetrator is a young person, many young people are exempt from hate crimes. The penal code does not accept certain age groups as possible hate crime perpetrators. Or if those who have mental illness at the root of their conduct, they are also exempt in many cases from a hate crime decision. So hate crimes are just a sort of very difficult situation to prove. Extremely difficult, because you don't really know what's going through the mind of the person when they perpetrate what I will call these discriminatory actions. It's very difficult to prove what's in the minds of these people at that particular. And then, of course, we have something called plea bargaining. So in many cases, these charges are plea bargained away because a person won't admit that it was hate crime in the first place. And then in order to get a conviction, the district attorneys will allow a plea bargain. And so the hate crime label will disappear from the criminal act. So while we have a rate of 65% conviction in many of these crimes due to plea bargaining and other things, you only have about a 15% conviction rate as a hate crime. And that's a crime in and of itself, because the statistics then don't really represent the terrible situation that we have in this country of discrimination and outright hate. So if you look at these statistics and everything, and you listen to the talk of politicians on punishing hate crimes, and the difficulty of proving the motivation behind an act, you see that there's a wide discrepancy in what people talk about and what they can actually do, and what they actually have that's necessary to obtain a conviction. Because the view of an act does not necessarily create a hate crime. You have to have really specific evidence. And a hate criminal is not necessarily going to say, okay, arrest me, I hated these kind of people. So it's a very, very difficult crime to convict. One of the biggest problems in proving hate crimes and getting laws on the books for those who attempt hate crimes is that there are many, many legislators in this country that disagree with the idea that you can criminalize someone's thinking patterns. So if a person thinks and hates, there are many who don't want to criminalize that fact. And that's unfortunate, because that allows these people to think and hate and get away with it. So it's just another nail in the so-called coffin of our society, that we can't properly handle hate as a crime. And I'm not saying it's easy. That no way is it easy. But it's too pervasive to keep ignoring. So I leave you with those thoughts this morning, and have a great day. Bye.